We are actually a non-profit organization, and our mission and vision are as follows. Our mission basically is to help prepare young minds for educational opportunities and to improve their outcome for researchers in various fields by bridging the gap between research and education. And our vision statement, we are focused on providing mentorship with educational and research training programs, especially for young scientists from developing countries and also developed countries, and particularly women in STEM. Our team, we have a diverse group, different diversity. We have our group cut across so many countries. We have people from Thailand, people from US, people from Canada, Australia, even back home in Nigeria. So you are welcome to visit our website and reach out to our team. And then, you can reach out to any one of them. They are willing to talk to you. They are awesome people. I'm very sure you will appreciate reaching out to them. For this, I want to quickly just brush through what we do in EdResearch thing. EdResearch Hub, we have 4 different programs, and I want you to quickly take a look at our website to understand what we do for each programs. So we have a program in mentorship, we have a program in research trainings and webinars or seminars. We have career readiness program, and we have community outreach. Basically, for this webinar, it's actually organized by the research web seminar and trainings, which I'm also a coordinator. And what we do basically is just to help train young minds in developing research ideas or research skills that will help them in drafting out a very, very grant awarding proposals, write articles that will be published in reputable journals, train them in also basic data analysis or the nutrients in data analysis. And we also offer guidance in writing statement of purpose, CV for people that are looking for graduate opportunities. And then we also, help people in looking at their applications and what is required for a successful application generally for grad studies. So for this webinar, which is actually titled Experimental Design in Research, Current Trends and Future Prospects, we've been going through a lot. We will be going through so many series. So for this series, the last series was actually for, if some of us joined, it was for applied science, which is just telling us about the current trends in applied science. But for this series, we were going a little bit different from applied science, where we are going to social sciences. So, and what we want to do basically right now is just to understand the nitty-gritty of research methodology for social science. And I'm very sure you will be blessed today, or you will gain a lot today after the program. So let me just give you a little brief about the facilitator. The facilitator of this program is a wonderful friend of mine. His name is Joshua. So I'm going to quickly, we met in Thailand, but he has been a wonderful friend ever since, even after I left Thailand, and we are still very good friends. So the he's a doctor, he will soon be a doctor, but now he's still currently running his PhD. But he's actually a lecturer in business administration at Qualitative University in Thailand, and is a fellow of the Higher Education Academy in the United Kingdom. He has his bachelor from Nigeria University of Ilorin, and he worked in banking sector for a long time before he moved to Thailand for his master's degree. And after, a master's degree in Princeton Supply University, and then after he finished, he actually he started a lecturing job in Wailalak University. He's passionate about helping others achieve their quality research, to achieve quality research through mentorship and also training in research methodologies and data analysis. He's a good data analyst. His research has been published in so many international journals, international reputable journals in the field of business, logistics, supply chain management, and food export policies. So now I have the privilege for me to invite him to this webinar. I'm very sure he's fully loaded for every one of us. And I want us to be ready. We should be ready. We should set our minds to it. And then I just want us to connect with this webinar. And I'm sure you'll gain one or two things from this webinar. So without taking much of our time, I want to invite Dr. Joshua Olayinka. Please can you take over from now? Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Dikpo. Thanks for the invite. I would like to briefly say that I'm still Mr., not Doctor yet, okay, as Dr. Dikpo rightly said. So today we'll be talking about the nitty-gritty of research methodology in social sciences. We've had a session before in applied sciences, like Dr. Dikpo said. So without, I'll just go through the slide just to guide our discussion. But what I wish that we'll do today is to have more of interaction. Still seeing how that's going to happen, but maybe in the question and answer time, it will be more interactive. I'll share my screen now and we can start the webinar. All right. As we know already, the topic for this webinar is understanding the nitty-gritty of research methodology in social sciences. And this is series 1. So it's not going to cover, even though we said nitty-gritty, it's not going to cover everything. We can cover it in less than an hour webinar. Okay. My name is Joshua Olayinka, and I'm the co-founder and the head of human resource of the organization. And I'm also a lecturer at Walalak University, a lecturer in business administration program at Walalak University in Thailand. Okay, so let's dive in. What are we going to learn today? I'll say these are the expected learning outcome. Today, my expectation is that we will go through the basic step-by-step procedure for social science research, and then we will know how to develop research instruments. Questionnaire mainly, we'll be talking about questionnaire mainly. And then we're talking about selecting the right statistics for our research and selecting software for analysis and discussing results. I don't want it to be a traditional form of lecture or speaking. I just try to identify the few areas I think are very important for us to understand in social science research. I know that our participants today, we have lecturers, we have graduate students, and we have people from science and social science. So I won't want to bore us with what we already know or some of the things that may not, we are not looking for today. So I'll focus on this aspect, hoping that it will capture our expectation for the webinar. All right, let's start with what makes social science research different. I'm sure those of us in social science, we already know that when we compare social science research with science research, it's like completely different thing. For science, they have animal treatments, they apply things to people, and people take medication, maybe they are developing new drugs. But for social science, we don't do that. We ask for opinions. We look at what is happening in our environment. We look at relationship, and it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just that they have different ways of doing the research. The methodologies are different. In social science, we don't have the animal lab. We do have laboratories. We do have laboratories, but not like the science lab where we put on the white cloth and work with animals or even with human trials and different thing, or work with different gadgets. No, we don't do that in social science. But rather, what we do most of the time is that we collect data, we formulate hypotheses, based on theory, and we go out there to test our hypotheses and come up with a resolution or a solution or a result that can advance social science or a different field. So that's basically the difference between social science and sciences. I may not capture her, but that's the background. That's most important part of the difference. All right, so let's move on to basic steps in social science research. Now, I did not put everything here. I said basic steps, and because we said social science, there are different fields, and different fields may have some specific methodology, but all social science and even science pass through this set of processes. Now, introduction parts of a research. Now, I put introduction and not like a report, but if you have to write a report, you sometimes a research report, you start with the introduction. But the most important part for our methodology in the introduction aspect is our research question and our research objective. And sometimes we start with the research question. There's a question we are trying to answer, and that's or there's an objective we want to achieve, and that's the beginning of the research. And then we, justify why we have to do that, why it is necessary, if there's a research gap in the field. Now, whereas we're talking about methodology, I'm still talking about research, the introduction part, research question and objectives, because it is still part of research methodology. It's very important for research methodology. Without it, we cannot know how to select our statistics. Without the objectives, we cannot know who will be our population, how do we select our sample and all that. So from introduction part, we move on to literature review. And I'm sure you already know what literature review is about, but the aspect that's important in one of the most important one for our methodology is the conceptual framework and the hypothesis. So having reviewed past literatures, what other people have done, understanding the theory of the theory that we can use to explain the variables that we have identified to explore. We come up with a conceptual framework and we hypothesize that, okay, happiness will be related to growth, or something will be related to, well, growth may be some form of science, but let's say to be specific, maybe happiness may be related to financial growth or something. Okay, so we come up with hypotheses, and after we've done that, we arrive at those hypotheses because of reviewing other people's literature. So we don't operate in vacuum. We build on existing literature, we build on existing researches. Sometimes we try to test existing theories. Sometimes we build on it. Okay, so that's basically social science. So from the review of those papers or from review of those literatures, we come up with hypotheses, and then we move on to our methodology, and then from our methodology, we talk about our results, we discuss our results. From our methodology, we move on to analysis, and then but we're going to focus on the methodology today, and that's the focus. We won't dwell on the research objective or the introduction aspect or background of study and all those things. We won't do that because for the lecturers in our midst, they may not be writing a report, just want to publish in journals, and some journals don't even ask you for literature review. They just ask you to do introduction, then methodology, and result and discussion, depending on each journals have their style. Okay, but we are not talking about journals today. This is series 1. Maybe later on, the coordinator might organize for writing, for publication, things like that. All right. So in terms of our methodology in social science, there's a big branch of research methodology. It is quantitative or qualitative. Now, for the qualitative, I won't dwell much on qualitative, but I will explain it now. For the qualitative research methodology, we don't do strong statistical analysis. Okay, what we do is we interview people. That's the way we collect our data. We interview people, but we do analyze the interview. We do transcription, and then we can do content analysis and different types of analysis to come up with a conclusion about our objective or to answer our research question. Now, but for the quantitative, which I'll dwell on, the quantitative, we need to collect data. And sometimes we use primary data or secondary data. Now, secondary data simply the ones that have been collected before, and primary data is the ones that we are collecting ourselves. So for me, I prefer primary data. I've worked with secondary data before. I've used data from World Bank, and even though it's from World Bank, it's still problematic. If you, however, use secondary data, you know that it's problematic in terms of data cleaning, because when they were collecting the data initially, they didn't have your research question in mind, right? The people collecting it were not thinking about you when they collected the data. So if you use secondary data, you have to do a lot of data cleaning and try to use what you have sometimes. And when they collected the data, they might not be thinking of your variable, right? So you may have to match things, try to come up with a proxy, use a variable as a proxy for your variable. So secondary data is like that, okay? But if you're using secondary data, you're still going to learn from this webinar. But for primary data, we basically, in social sciences, we use Questionnaire as our research instrument. We'll talk about that much later. So when you have, at the beginning, you already have your research question, you have your research objectives, you have done your literature review to know, if you've done your literature review to know which variables you need to explore. Most times we have the independent variable and the dependent variable. So we have independent variables and dependent variable or dependent variables, okay, depending on what you study. You then need to decide that what's your population, which population are you applying this to? Now, in social science, sometimes we have research that has been done in some countries, and we want to replicate and see whether we have the same result in our country or in a different context, okay? So your population, now when you know your population, for instance, if I'm doing, let's say, job satisfaction among bankers in, say, Ghana, for example, okay? So I know that my population is bankers in Ghana, right? So when I know my population, probably sometimes I might know the number of people, like the number of bankers in Ghana. It is possible there may be data on that, but even if I have data on the whole population, I cannot collect data from, if I have information about the number of the whole population, let's say there are, say, 200,000 bankers in Ghana, as an example off the top of my head, I cannot collect data from 200,000. I need to collect from a sample, okay? So the most important thing here in research is that your sample must be a good representation of the population. Now, the sample size depends on, in social science, we are familiar with some authors, Yimani and all that. We are familiar with some calculations about to know the right sample size for the population. So most times should be, if the population is becoming large, the sample should be higher than 400, 500, but there are some calculations that we can use to know the required sample size for the population. But sometimes we don't even know the number of the population, right? We don't know how many people are in this group or how many people are affected by what we are trying to study. We still need to get a good sample size. And when we determine the sample size, we want to know how should we collect the data, the sampling method, okay? So there are, the sampling could be probability-based sampling, okay, or non-probability-based sampling. That is, the chances of selecting somebody to fill a questionnaire, right, is based on probabilities. Like that's probability sampling that is based on, is due to chance. Like it doesn't happen for sure, right? And the non-probability sampling is that it is for sure that you're going to select this respondent or this candidate for your questionnaire. So in research, we prefer, in social science, we prefer probability sampling and random, and that is the common one, but it doesn't mean that. It depends on our research objective, it depends on our population, it depends on what we're trying to study. We could use other form of sampling method, okay? We could use under the non-probabilistic, we could use convenience sampling method, and even under probability, we may not use random, we could use stratified different sampling method. So when we've determined what we're going to do, how we're going to, how many people we're going to give questionnaire to, and how we're going to select them, we need to talk about the research instrument. So for sciences, their research instrument is maybe the measuring, cylinder, whatever they use in the laboratory. But for us, our research instrument is question and answer, like questionnaire. Okay, we ask question, and it is very important that we get the questionnaire right. It is very important that the instrument is unbiased. It is very important that the instrument is correct and use the right scale. It's like, it's like normal every instrument. If the weight for measuring or the scale for measuring is biased, then we are not going to get accurate results. So it's the same way. So I'm going to dwell a little bit on developing questionnaire. All right. So when we talk about developing questionnaire, the easiest way is to adapt from past literature. When we adapt from past literature, that is if we have somebody who've worked on what we are trying to work on. If you have, for instance, if I'm talking about satisfaction, job satisfaction, or psychological capital, employee engagement. So these are concepts in human resource management. So I'm just using that as an example. Okay. So if I'm talking about these concepts, other people have worked on it. They are not new. So when we review the journals, the paper, we'll find that they use certain questionnaire. Now, not all journals, not all articles publish their questionnaire, but there is a way you can know the questionnaire, right? But then you can, write to the authors to give you the questionnaire. I've done that before, and they respond quite well because they are happy that somebody is reading their work and they know that somebody will cite their work. So the citation is a good thing in academia, right? You have higher citation, then you can, apply for promotion and all. So you can write to the authors to request for their questionnaire, but then you may not write to the authors if it is in some people will put it in the appendix of their article, but some people will not put it, but they will put things like, so if they've done exploratory factor analysis, I'll talk a little bit about that later on. If they've done something like exploratory factor analysis, so they will list all the question, but they will not list it verbatim, right? They will list the question and then they will talk about their factor loading and all that. So with that, you can have an idea of what the questionnaire is. Okay, so you may not necessarily write the author, but if you can write the author, it's also good to have an interaction with other authors or other researchers. All right, so when you adapt from past literature, adapting, you don't take it, you don't take everything like that. Of course, if you're adapting literature questionnaire from different author, you must cite them in your research. You must cite them that you've adapted questionnaire from so and so. Okay. Now, but even if you get the questionnaire, you can't use everything word for word, because it is possible you are applying it in different contexts. So you must adapt it to your context. Because you've changed your you've changed the questionnaire in a way, and sometimes you can change it into a different language. Okay, so it might be a native language that you want to, your respondents can only answer in a native language, so you need to adapt to the native language. And if you're doing that, make sure you do translation back and forth, right? So if I'm changing from English to Thai language, right, and I give a translator, please translate from English to Thai language, but I give a different translator, translate the Thai word back to English. Now, I understand English, I cannot speak Thai, I cannot read Thai, but I can compare the two English and say, okay, the translation is perfect, or I can go back and forth with the translators, different translators, I mean, two separate translators, so that in any case, the respondents understand what I'm trying to ask. They understand the question, and they are better able to answer. So when we've done that, we want to test the validity. So the validity test, we most times use IOC method, which is, you get experts in the field to look at the questions, whether they are valid. They look at whether the questions can address your objectives. So that's the IOC method. Then we take a little sample, a test with a little sample that is, we have few respondents, fill the question, and you test for reliability. You can use Cronbach alpha, you can use composite reliability. And once you get above 0.7 for those variables, and you can take it like that and then apply to a larger sample. All right, so that's the easy part, but sometimes we may have to develop questionnaire ourselves. And that's the difficult part. For me, I usually avoid this, but if there is no option and I have to develop the instrument myself, the research instrument myself, the first step is to have interview. So we start with interviewing respondents, that is whether focus group or one-on-one, with recorded, transcribed, and we do literature review to understand the scope of each variable. Okay, and then we come up with at least 3 questions per variable. And in some textbook, they might tell you just 2 questions, at least 2 questions per variable. But for me, I think at least 3 is fine. So why do I say at least 3? The point is, so I use the word job satisfaction earlier on, the concept job satisfaction. So if I ask somebody, one of the questions for job satisfaction may be, are you satisfied with your job? And that question is kind of big, like, am I satisfied with my job? I can say, but of course I will give them a scale. It's always good to use Likert scale, like 5-point Likert scale, 6-point Likert scale, 7 points. Some people say you should use hot number. Yeah, I see the reason why they say that, which is good, but it doesn't matter. What I think is most important is when you use Likert scale, if you have, let's say in your research, you have 5 variables that you're measuring for, and you use Likert scale for each of these 5 variables, you should use the same Likert scale. Like if you use 5-point Likert scale, you should use 5 points for all. Because when you use different, it may affect your results, but there is a way you can fix it anyway. So, but to avoid any problem, use the same level of Likert scale. So I was talking about job satisfaction. If I say, are you satisfied with your job? On a scale of 1 to 5, I might pick 4, but then think about it and say maybe 3, or think about it again and say maybe 2, right? Because it's too big. I think satisfaction comes from different aspects. So job satisfaction, for example, I could be satisfied with my colleagues, like work environment. I could be satisfied with the pay. I could be satisfied with the like, for instance, the level of exposure, or the pressure sometimes, things like that. So when we're designing questionnaire, we have to, because each concept might have different dimension to people, right? So let's say I want to know whether you enjoyed or you're happy with this webinar, right? Maybe I want to take a survey after and I'm asking the question, are you happy or are you satisfied with this webinar? Now, that is too big, right? I should break it down to say, are you satisfied? I can say, are you satisfied with the presentation? Are you satisfied with, the question and answer time, the PowerPoint slide, different aspects. So that helps us to then, get a good picture from different dimensions of satisfaction or happiness or whatever, okay? So when we use Likert scale, also for this, we still have to do validity tests and reliability tests with a small sample before we can apply it to a bigger sample. Now, whichever whichever mode we choose, whether we adapt from past literature or we develop a new questionnaire, at the end of it all, when we get the whole data, we still need to perform factor analysis. Now, factor analysis will help us to reduce the dimensionality of any of our questions. For instance, I might have collected questions on satisfaction, and when I do factor analysis, let's say if I use past literature, like if I adapt from past literature, I can do confirmatory factor analysis. But if I do a new questionnaire, I can do exploratory factor analysis. But you can do either. Like you can still do exploratory factor analysis even if you adapt from past literature. It will still give you the dimensions of your question. So I've collected data on satisfaction, let's say satisfaction with this webinar. And when I do factor analysis, I might find out that maybe I've collected, I draw out, say 5 questions on satisfaction with the webinar. And when I did factor analysis, 2 questions loaded together and 3 questions loaded together in terms of factor loading, okay? So it gives me the idea that there are 2 dimensions to this question. So I can kind of group the first 2 questions and say, okay, this is satisfaction based on PowerPoint or something, and this is satisfaction based on presentation. Like, it will give me the dimension of my variables. Okay, that helps because it will help the interpretation of our results. If we have a better, it's a better research and journals also look out for these. So it's part of the things that we do in social sciences. Okay, without taking, I think if we have questions on that, I can come back to that later on. So when we have collected our data, the next thing, or even before we collect our data, actually, we must know how we're going to analyze our data. What are the things we're going to, what are the things we want to get from our data? So this part I title is selecting statistics for analysis. Now, there are different statistics, and we know that statistics is what we say for samples, while parameter is what we say for the population. So we have a sample that we collected in a way that represents the population. So we need to perform some statistics to make an assumption about the whole population. Okay, so if you are intending to describe your population, and if you have numerical variables, so numerical variables are the ones that, from the word numerical, that you have numbers for it. Like, for instance, the questionnaire on a Likert scale, so somebody pick 4, somebody pick 5, so there's number for it. Okay, but categorical variables are the ones that, it's just categories, say gender, male, female, others, and all that. Those are categories. So, but even the numerical variable and categorical variable, they have, different branch under them. So it could, under numerical variable, it could be discrete, it could be continuous. But we can ask questions about that later on. Okay, so if you want to describe your population, then you should be looking at statistics. So I'll focus majorly on the numerical variables since I've started talking about questionnaire. So if you want to describe your population, then you should be looking at statistics like mean, median, mode, quartile range, interquartile range, standard deviation. Now, depending whether you want to talk about their central tendency or their dispersion. So you choose any of the statistics here, and that can help you to summarize your sample and give you an estimate for the population. Right, there will be error definitely. But if the estimate is unbiased, then it should be it's better. It's a better estimator for the population. Okay, so but for categorical variable, then you can be doing proportion, frequency, and then you can use some charts. And for both, you can use some charts. Right, box plots, stem and leaf for numerical variable. Now, that's for describing. So in this branch of statistics, we call them the descriptive statistics. Okay, we have descriptives, we have inferential statistics. So, but yeah. If what you want to do is to get inference about one group, right? So you then be looking at t-test of the mean, right? And then confidence interval estimate of the mean. So if you want to, for instance, let's say you want to know whether this is part of a group, right? I'm trying to find an example that I can use here. But if you want to know whether something is part of a group, say, for example, I know that the average weight of people in a country, let's say children, like let's say the birth weights of people in a country is say 3.5 kg or something, and then I find a baby somewhere, I measure the weight. I want to know whether that baby is from that population, right? Something like that, right? I can use t-test of the mean to know, or confidence interval estimate of the mean of the average, right? To know whether this is from the population. That's talking about inference about one group. Okay, if you want to compare between two groups, then you should be using peer t-test. So whether these two groups are different or they're the same, right? Whether they are from the same population, sort of, or they are different. Okay, you can also do f-test of difference between two variants. So they can be for the t-test, it looked at the mean, the average, but the f-test look at their dispersion, their variance. So it can be that you're testing between whether the mean are the same or their dispersions are related. So they might be from the same population. Okay, I will move fast because of time. If you're comparing more than two groups, then you should use one way or another. So I'm focusing only on the numerical variable. Then if you're analyzing relationship between two variables, then you should use covariance, coefficient of correlation, familiar with correlation, and simple linear regression. Now, whereas simple linear regression is sort of like a predictive statistics. That is, it goes beyond just saying that these are related. It goes further to say these influences this at what rates, the R square change and all that. Okay, but it's still about two variables. Now, if you're analyzing relationship between more than two variables, then you should be using multiple regression or structural equation modeling. Now, structural equation modeling is also a regression-based statistics, right? But it doesn't. The difference is that when we do multiple regression, when we've looked at the questions, we kind of find average of the questions for each variable, right? Or sum it together and then test the variables, the independent variable on the dependent variable. But for structural equation modeling, it starts the regression even with the question to arrive at the right weight or the right score for each variable and then move on to test. So there's a path coefficient, there's, there's path coefficient and then factor analysis. So for structural equation model, it's just like a better, depending on what you're doing anyway. If you doing a modeling, trying to find the paths for many variables, then structural equation modeling might be a good one. Actually, in social science, we kind of like the journals kind of like prefer better statistics these days, not just multiple regression or simple linear regression, like want higher level. So structural equation model is like secondary level statistic analysis. Okay. And if we have questions later, I'll take them. And let's talk about the software. Okay. The software for data analysis, we have different software. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Okay, we have different software for data analysis. There are a lot. So, but the popular ones, we use IBM SPSS. We could use Excel. Excel can actually do a lot. The regression we talked about, most of the basic statistics we can do it on Excel. And then we have the Power BI, which is also Microsoft Excel product or Microsoft product. And that's for our visualization. If you're trying to get good graphs, you can use it Power BI. So we have other softwares like Stata, Amos. Now Amos and Smart PLS, they are good for the structural equation modeling. Both the covariance based and the partially square structural equation modeling. And nowadays, researchers now use the R programming language and Python because we have big data. We deal with big data now, right? Because it's easy to collect data, and some of this data, if too much, Excel, SPSS, these softwares cannot handle it. So it's better we do it with R. And the R and Python has a lot of other flexibility that help researchers nowadays. All right, so we've talked about so many things. And because of the time, and knowing that this is just series 1, it's not, even though it is nitty-gritty, we can cover it in few minutes. So I'll take questions. I'll allow the coordinator to speak and coordinate the questions part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joshua, and I'm sure everybody got 1 or 2 things from your presentation. It was very, very impactful. Right now, we'll go into the question and answering, and the coordinator for this particular section is Dr. Anujit Koshel, which is, he is the co-coordinator for the research seminars and training program at the EdResearch Hub. So Dr. Anujit, can you please take over the question and answering section? And you have about 15 minutes to coordinate this. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for such a nice presentation, Joshua. And I'm really hoping that everyone who is listening and have paid some attention, they have got a few things out of it. And it is pretty interesting. He explained a lot of things and all the basics of research. And if you want to continue in this particular direction, you guys have to pay a lot of attention. And the truth is very important, right? And slow by slow, everyone can do it. So now the thing is, you guys can ask any questions, whatever you want to. And you guys can raise your hand, or if you want to type, you can do that, and I can coordinate with it. And it will be advisable if you guys can open your video cam so that we can see each other and we can interact more professionally and more openly, because this is how we guys can learn from each other, right? By interacting and asking our doubts and putting forward our expressions, because this is a platform where we want to put our doubts in front of the expertised person who have passed that particular route, the same thing which you guys are going through right now, what to do, how to do. So that will help you guys. So you take the opportunity and please go ahead. I'm opening the floor for your questions. Thank you. Anyone? please go ahead. Any basic questions, whatever you want to know. You can even ask about how, these guys have started their way to research. That's a very interesting and, tempting question for any researcher.
Joshua, thank you for. I'm supposed to signify that I want to ask a question. I'm sorry. Dr. Anujit, I want to ask a question. Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Dr. Joshua, once again, I want to appreciate you for this wonderful presentation. I want to ask you about selecting the right experimental design or research, statistical research method. Like I saw two-way ANOVA, one-way ANOVA. Like in applied science that I belong to, we normally do either if you're just comparing between one variable, one dependent variable. One dependent variable. So it's just like one-way ANOVA. But when you're doing like two or more, we do two-way ANOVA. So I don't know if that's also similar to what you guys do in social science. That's question number one. And then question number two is most times I have some of my friends that are in applied science that are also collecting data from, we go and do questionnaire kind of research. We get data from people. We ask questions, and then basically for applied science, when we want to analyze, we just analyze via just description. So how many people agree, how many people did not agree. And so what do you suggest? Do you have any other way we can actually work on this? We don't want to do what you guys are doing in social science completely, like all those your statistical tools and the way you guys validate your data. We just want to have, like, for example, if you are doing sensory analysis, we just want to have an idea if people like our product or they don't like our product. So it's a yes or a no. So what we just do is we just find the mean, and then we come and say, 50% of the applicants or the panelists love our product, and therefore this product is good. That's just how we infer from that result. So do you have any other suggestion? And yeah, I'm just throwing it out to the house.
Right. Thank you for the question. Yeah, speaking about sensory analysis. So yeah, generally, statistics is the same whether you're in science or social science. Statistics is the same. It does the same thing. In terms of the choice of statistics, I'll speak to that. But you mentioned about sensory analysis. Do you like our product? Yes or no? Well, I would say, as talking from social science perspective, I think that it's difficult for somebody to just say yes or no for something that they like. If you want to go deep, down, like if you want to dig down, right? They could rate like on the scale of 1 to 5, or on the scale of 1 to 3, or on the scale of, to say, okay, I like it this level, right? But if we just say yes and no, it doesn't give us. We only know people who like it and people who do not like it. So they are divided into just two dichotomous kind of answer. It doesn't give us, it's not from social science perspective, it is not rich enough. It doesn't tell us more about how much people like it, okay? Because it's just yes or no. So for me, I may like it, but as somebody who is answering the question, I may like it, but have, maybe I may like the flavor, I may not like the, the taste or the texture, right? I may like the smell, but not the texture. So, and even liking the texture, I can say on the scale of 1 to 5, right? That's social science. Okay, so we try to make sure that our research, because when it comes to asking for opinion, people's opinion, sometimes it depends on what you are thinking at the moment, right? We can tick anything. We can just say, I don't like this guy, and just pick no for him, or pick, But if we put it on the scale, then we can better understand the opinion or the thought of people. So, but in terms of selecting the right statistics, like I said, it depends on what you're trying to do. Right? If you want to know, sometimes for instance, if you want to know if people like, you can use average because you're trying to describe how people like it. But if you're trying to relate how people like it to something else, right? You're relating to another variable, then you should use an inferential statistics like, correlation, regression, either linear or depending on how many variables. So that's how we select statistics, and it's the same for all fields, whether science or social science. I hope I answered your question in a way.
Actually, I'm supposed to have told you, yes, we don't use like yes or no. I just said that we have a scale, use a unique scale for sensory.
Okay.
But at the end of everything, we just analyze by average, and then we will infer by that value whether the majority of our population like our products. So based on, and it's basically we divide into section, not just sensory, texture, flavor, appearance, color.
Yeah. I think it's fine to just say majority like the product if that's the process you follow. But you're just describing that. It's just description. That's why in that selecting statistics, I said if you're doing description, now you can use majority, you can use average, you can use even median, right? Depending on whether it's correctly, because but of course you should know that there are some ways you can check whether there are outliers in your data, right? If somebody just puts 0, like, and you try to find average and it brings the average down, right? You remove outliers and all that. But it's totally fine to just use average to describe the population.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Great. Very well answered, I will say. And before there is a question, and I'm going to forward. Before I do that, I just want to say, see, research can be used in many places. So whatever the questions are, don't think like if you want to go very deep inside, then only you will think about research, but it will be very good for you. Okay, so the question is that I want to ask, what is the limit data that SPSS Stata can capture, and that of R and Python?
Okay. For SPSS, I am not totally sure, but it's the same limit. It should be the same limits like for Excel. I've not tried. I've not tried a huge data on SPSS. I could check that online, but right now I would just say I'm not sure for SPSS how many data it can take. But I would think that if your data is running to say 500,000, definitely you cannot do it on SPSS. I think that's a given. I don't think you can do it on SPSS. I mean, if the number of respondents, for example, is 500,000, I don't think SPSS can handle that. So because nowadays, or because of social media, because of many factors, we get data everywhere. So big data, when the data is large in terms of volume, in terms of variety, right? Then we can use programming languages like R and Python. So I'm not really sure of the specific amounts, but the data, the number of data that SPSS I can check their website, but I'm not sure at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. But what I will suggest that Bami Gebuyo, sorry if I am spelling it wrong. So you guys, you can share your contact details, and we will connect you with Joshua. You can definitely move forward and collaborate or ask whatever the query is. So yeah, the floor is again open for questions. Any questions? Any basic questions? Research is life. In our life, we always have to analyze. We always have to put stats, right? So guys, go forward, ask any questions. All questions are valid. No one? That's interesting, because the talk was very good though, because although I am from science background, right? But what I can see, the research is based on the same fundamentals everywhere, right? Because if I can see that in our cases also we have to think about the hypothesis, right? The objective, what we are planning, what are the questions, and then we try to prove it through, experimental procedures and some techniques. And same thing is in social sciences. The only thing which is required that the individual has to be, they should tell the truth. That's important, and that should be the motto in life, because if you're not telling the truth, the output will be entirely completely wrong, or opposite in direction. So please go ahead and ask any questions. This is a very good opportunity. You guys can simply chat and talk about something. So I can see hand. So yeah, Deepo, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Joshua, I just want to know, because you guys are working on very, very, your data is subjective. It's not objective like what we do. We have objective data. We get our data from equipment. It's almost perfect. Our precision is very great because it's objective. But you deal with subjective data, like people can be biased, like you said. Some people might just be in a bad mood when you are asking them that question. They're just feeling whatever they want to feel. True.
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Okay,
Can you
I said
the question?
to control outliers in your data.
Okay, yeah, very good question. Yeah, like you said, social science is subjective. Now, the fact that it's subjective doesn't mean it's a lie, right? It doesn't, like Dr. Alenji said, you have to say the truth. So what we do is that we try to make it as objective as possible to be able to, like, that's the work of the statistics and the research methodology, to make sure that we can take away the bias. And that's also one of the reasons why we have large sample size. Okay, not everybody will be biased. Okay, and after we've collected data, nowadays we collect data online, so it's easy. Google Doc or something like that. It's easy that you get the data on Excel, in Excel format or in different formats. But sometimes, in those days, we collect data physically by giving questionnaire out. So we put those data on Excel, and then we do, so each of these statistics have their own tests, like assumptions. We test those assumptions. We also check for outlier. So one of the ways we check for outlier is to use interquartile range. Okay, so for instance, if you use SPSS use 3 times interquartile range. So sort of like look at, so let's say this in a particular variable, in a particular question, looks at the range between the 50 percentile, the 25, between the first quartile and the third quartile, right? Then look at the range, then use 3 times for SPSS specifically, use 3 times in interquartile. So you use 3 times. So any data that falls outside of 3 times interquartile range is considered outlier. That is, somebody made a mistake. It's not in the majority. Great. It's exceptional. So we remove those from our outlier. Sort of a way to reduce our the bias, like you said. So that's one of the ways we do it.
Very interesting, Joshua, and I hope it answers Dr. Oladipupo's question. And what I understood that, preparing the questions is very important. How you present the question, that's very important. That's what I understood from Joshua. So that's a great presentation. And as we know that there are time limits, and we have to wrap up this beautiful presentation and this meeting, I will hand over the mic to back to Dr. Oladipupo, and yeah, let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again. I really appreciate everybody for joining this webinar, and I hope we get 1 or 2 things from this presentation. Personally, I got a lot, and I will be taking it forward for my research. Right now, I want to say thank you very much to I'm calling you doctor because I feel you're going to be a doctor very soon. So to Dr. Joshua, Mr. Joshua, for the wonderful presentation, for taking your time to bless us with this presentation. We say thank you. And for everybody that joined, for taking their time, their data to join this webinar also. I really appreciate your time. And I hope that going forward, we'll have more interesting webinar for every one of us. And at this junction, the EdResearch and everybody in EdResearch is saying thank you, and we are saying goodbye. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.